Let us begin. We are currently up to page 81 in the theory and practice of universal ethics, the Noahide laws by Rabbi Dr. Shimon Dovid Cowen of Australia. If you have your own copy, page 81, chapter 4, Society, Social Policy, and the Noahide laws. This chapter is going to get, again, quite philosophical. And it's going to speak about, as the title implies, the social policy of the world and the effect that we're supposed to have. And we're being that, especially now, more so than ever before, much more than when the author wrote this book just a few years ago. Today, the world is beyond, as we know, twisted, confused, and that's putting it nicely. So, more than ever before, arguably, we have the mandate to introduce or reintroduce God Almighty into the picture for the benefit of all of mankind and to realize the purpose of creation. So let us begin reading inside. Overview. At its foundation, society is influenced by a worldview, which comes to shape all areas of social policy. The worldview of the Noahide laws has a concept of nature with a creator and of the human with a soul. The human being is equipped by this soul linked to God to utilize and incorporate nature into an ethical human project, the goal of which is the redemption both of humanity and nature. Society's underlying worldview is raised at a second level of society, the personal moral culture, into the realm of personal consciousness. Noahide law brings its worldview into the moral culture, first of all, by providing a spiritual literacy in the life of the soul and belief in God. Secondly, it upholds the biological family as the transmitter of personal human spiritual identity. Thirdly, it fosters an ethic of respect for religion, which vitalizes and protects the life of the spirit. Those who just joined us, we are currently on page 81, if you have your own copy, bottom of page 81. The third level of society, social organization, protects individuals in their relationships with one another. Here too, values are necessarily drawn from the personal moral culture into the policies concerned with interpersonal relationships in the domains of social organization. Thus, for Noahide law, justice is concerned not only with objective and impartial adjudication, but also with the source and content of law. The law of theft and material harm is concerned not only with just and corporal exchange, but with personal integrity in the services exchanged. Finally, properly to protect life, one must know what life is. Throughout this chapter, the Noahide laws are compared with social policies arising from a competing contemporary worldview of hedonistic materialism. He's going to talk a lot about that. It's worldview of a self-sufficient, creatorless nature and soulless human being, characterized by mere shared sentences and an ability to a utilitarian calculus of pleasure and pain, corrodes the personal moral culture, and then corrupts also ethical social organization in the realm of justice, economics, and the protection of life. So the problem really is a very basic one, very fundamental, that if you don't have the divine law and the recognition of who we are and where we came from and what the purpose is, then even though arguably every individual, every normal human being in his core is good. One can make that argument. Not everybody agrees with that. Philosophers talk about that, but there is definitely a very strong argument that every normal, healthy human being in his core essence is good and doesn't need to understand it intellectually, but just wants to be a good person. But lots of factors come in and corrupt the individual in the situation. Even if that were to be true, let's say it is, but if you're missing the basic point, so then what decides what's good and what's right? Certain areas are what you would think are black and white. But then there's a great deal which is up to each individual's feeling. And then subjectively speaking, this person thinks this is right and the other person thinks no, that's absolutely wrong, and so on. Number one, page 82, 1, nature and the worldview of society. The worldview of hedonistic materialism. The great sociologist Max Weber understood society to be structured ultimately by worldviews, or as he says in German, Weltanschauungen. These worldviews were built out of concepts of nature or the world in terms of its foundation, traditionally understood in relation to the deity and the human being's relationship to the world or nature. Historical societies had little question about God. It was simply a matter of how they understood God and how they understood the relationship of the human being to the world as a form of service of the divine. In order to bring out the underlying worldview of the Noahide laws, it is here contrasted with the secular worldview currently competing with it to shape social policy in contemporary society. This contemporary worldview, which has been termed hedonistic materialism, seeks strongly to influence society in ways at variance with the Noahide laws. It also has its basis in a philosophy of nature and a concept of the relationship of humanity to nature, which is outlined in a work entitled Animal Liberation. The book is essentially atheistic. It dismisses both the concept that the world has a creator and omits any consideration that the human being possesses a soul, an agency of its creator, which would entitle the human being to a special place in nature. It describes religion as obsolete and as mere ideology, used to defend the domination by one species, humans, over other species within nature. In other words, this approach of this animal liberation book basically wants to play down the responsibility and the authority and the greatness of the human being. And let's quote, it states, the attitudes towards animals of previous generations are no longer convincing because they draw on presuppositions, religious, moral, metaphysical, that are now obsolete. Because we do not defend our attitudes in the way that S. Thomas Aquinas, for example, defended his attitudes to animals. We may be ready to accept the Anaquists used the religious, moral, and metaphysical ideas of the time to mask the naked self-interest of human dealings with other animals. If then we can see the past generations accepted as right and natural attitudes that we recognize as ideological camouflages for self-serving practices. And if at the same time, it cannot be denied that we continue to use animals to further our own minor interests in violation of their major interests, we may be persuaded to take a moral skeptical view of those justifications of our own practices that we ourselves have taken to be right and natural. In short, the claim is that it can no longer be maintained by anyone but a religious fanatic that man is the special darling of the whole universe, or that other animals were created to provide us with food, or that we have divine authority over them and divine permission to kill them. So basically, his whole argument is that we are just animals, and just because we feel the way we do, or just because we may be the mightiest and the strongest animals in the kingdom, in the world of nature, we have no rights to control or utilize or look down at animals as merely being something to feed us or something for us to use. So that's his whole thing, that take out the whole idea of a human being and of God with a purpose, etc. It is surprising that the rejection of millennia of religious experiences as fanatical and obsolete should be so cursory. One finds sometimes among the writings of this doctrine a request for proof of the existence of God and the divine authority of religious tradition, but they do not seem to have the will or interest to seek it out. It's just like they challenge it, but they're not really interested. There is an ultimate choice between the root assumption that the material world is all there is and the traditional religious assumption based on the acknowledged use of and the experience of the human soul, that there is something deeper and more fundamental for nature and the world, namely a godly enlivenment or sustainment of the existence of creation. The former is what hedonistic materialism prefers to believe. Thus, Darwinism is taken up by hedonistic materialism, not as a practical working scientific theory, but as an absolute materialistic metaphysical cosmology. And we quote, "The storm of resistance which met the theory of evolution and of the descent of man from animals, a story too well known to need retelling here, is an indication of the extent to which speciesist ideas had come to dominate Western thought. The idea that man is the product of a special act of creation and that the other animals were created to serve him was not to be given up without resistance." Whilst others use Darwinist biology pragmatically and separate it from metaphysical implications or seek to meld it with distinct spiritual concerns, this worldview utilizes it to found a thoroughgoing materialism. It proceeds to fuse philosophical Darwinism with a pleasure principle, or a calculus of pleasure and pain, drawn from the utilitarianism of the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham. The latter is used to resolve the question of the relation of the human being to nature, and specifically animals. It begins by posing their commonality, according to which the human being is also an animal, a human animal, in the shared possessions of sentience. Sentience expresses itself in a desire for enjoyment or pleasure, and a revulsion from pain. So that's like a built-in natural thing that we all have. These are claimed to form the essential legitimate interests of both humans and animals. To this commonwealth of animals, both human and non-human animals, is applied Bentham's dictum. Each to count for one and none for more than one. Got that? In other words, everybody is equal. Anticipating the obvious question that human beings have the all-important distinguishing features of thought and speech, right? Animals don't have that. So Bentham is again invoked on animals. The question is not, can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? Since, according to hedonistic materialism, the faculties of intellect and speech are not consequential differentiators of humans from animals, compared to their common capacity for suffering and enjoyment. It is wrong to kill animals in order to eat them or to utilize their hides for clothing, since the primary characteristic of both humans and animals is sentience. Both are entitled to equality of consideration. To impose suffering on any kind of animals is mere tyranny. So basically, these philosophies are as follows. Their presumably, their approach is there's no creator. Okay. So therefore, the study of the sciences that we have the world, so there is things which don't move, so to say, don't seem to have life. They're inanimate, stones, earth. Then there's the world of vegetation, fine. And then there's the animal kingdom. And humans are no more, no less than animals. Now, he didn't say this explicitly, but being that you have certain animals, the carnivores and the carnivores, whatever, different types. So you have certain animals which they survive by eating meat of other animals. And it's not just, well, they wait for the other animals to drop dead and then eat them, but they actually go ahead and kill animals, right? As we all know, they take their claws, etc. In a very cruel, vicious way, they kill other animals. And that's how they survive. Now, that's cruel. That's wrong. Likewise, these philosophies will tell you, the human being, which is the most powerful, and we can even take control of the lion or whatever is the wild beast and the most mighty, king of the jungle, or what have you, with our advanced technology, because we made weapons, harmful, destructive things, which animals did not manufacture. At best, they take a stick, a rock, but they don't actually manufacture things intellectually that can hurt other animals. But we are even worse, because we have intelligence, and they don't use that to prove any positive point. We have this intelligence which enabled us to be bad animals. And therefore, we go ahead and we kill other animals. We hunt them and kill them, and we eat them. Most humans eat meat, poultry. What gives us a right to do that? Or as he mentioned, we take animals, and again, not always animals that died on their own, but we take animals and we use their hide for our shoes, for our clothing, for our furniture, etc., etc. Alligator shoes, an alligator purse, etc. And what gives us a right to trap and kill the alligator? That's very cruel. That's basically their approach. So the problem is, as we're going to explain out, It's a very fundamental difference. The problem is in the root. If it's godless, if the human being has no different soul than the animal, then that philosophy kind of has a point. I mean, you still have the problem with why do we have intelligence and we can speak intelligently? Of course, they have their own languages, but we can see that we have intelligence and they only work on instinct. But still, no, the point is pleasure and pain. They have pleasure and pain. They want pleasure, they don't want pain. Same thing as the human being, pleasure and pain. That's all it is. They've reduced the human being to an animal. The Noahide relationship to nature. Now let's speak about the true, proper approach. The Noahide worldview, by contrast, sees in the foundation of the physical world or nature the ongoing creative and sustaining act of God. That is, not only was the world once created, but it is constantly sustained in existence by God. It's interesting to note that it's commendable that this author is taking deep, or I should say novel, concepts that Hasidus, the teachings of Hasidus, have revealed and brought into the world merely less than 300 years ago. And he's taking that is actually the belief system for the Noahide as well, which is beautiful. In other words, what he just said now, traditional Judaism didn't necessarily realize that until it was taught by the Baal Shem Tov, and then, of course, elaborated by the author of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe. So not only did God create the world way back when and set it into motion, but God, to use our terms, is actively involved and constantly, every instant, he is recreating the world. Additionally, this means that the creation of each and everything anew, in every moment, in its particular circumstances, is also providential. God decides to renew each thing in the moment in such and such a way, with its special potentialities and purposes for utilization, however direct or indirect, towards the redemptive goal of creation. This concept of nature of the world, as founded on the ongoing creative and providential act of God, is something which the soul can see and ratify. Now, this philosophy that we're discussing now is not only very empowering, but it makes a person, it should make anyone who has this philosophy so happy and joyous and excited. Let me just explain it, what we just read over here, for the sake of clarity, or for some that are not completely familiar with it. It's, he's just saying in one short paragraph a very deep concept in Hasidus that is discussed at length. So let me try to keep it brief as well. We're saying that God is creating the world every moment, from anew, absolutely from non-existence, from nothingness to becoming. Just like the first moment of creation, when God says, let there be, and then boom, no evolution, but there was just a bunch of big bangs, and nothing went bang except for the word of God, and boom, bang, there it is. There's the earth, there's the solar system, etc., etc. That's how it was the very first moment, each one of the 6 days of creation. Hasidus tells us that's how it is every single moment since. It's not just that he set it into motion, or it has to be fueled, or it's constantly, it's being recreated from absolute non-existence into existence. That having been said, So now, how do things, let's say, age or decay? Why does the fruit go from green to yellow to brown to black? How does that happen? If every single moment it's being created. So that's what he mentioned over here. Every moment it's being created in that way that it's supposed to be right now. So it's not like we see that it naturally is progressing from being underripe to overripe to etc. No. Each moment he's creating it the way it's supposed to be that moment. Every single thing in the world, every human being, everything is being recreated the way that it's supposed to be at that given time. And the goal is all going towards the redemption goal of creation. That's the purpose. That's the goal. And that's what's being created. And with that, we could give the simple answer to the question of, let's say, when you're dealing with the age of the universe. So let's say they found fossils, or let's say they found dinosaurs, or what have you, that according to whatever, I don't know, carbon dating or whatever their means of measuring the age, and it came out to be hundreds of millions of years old. They say, oh, how can you say that the world was created less than 6,000 years ago when it's hundreds of millions of years old? So a very, very simple answer to that, without getting too complicated, when man was created, Adam, was he made like a newborn who just emerged out of his mother, which he did not have? Or was he created as an adult? So of course he was created as an adult. He skipped childhood. The first instant, when as it's described in Bereshit in Genesis, when God created him with the earth and however it's described, and then blew into his nostrils a breath of life, a soul. He was already an adult. And likewise, the first animals, or the famous philosophical question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? They were created as a complete, fully grown entity, an animal, whatever it has. The first trees on the planet didn't all start off as seeds. So just like you can have an animal that's 10 years old and a human being that's 20 years old, so why can't you have whatever it may be, let's say the dinosaur that was created on the very first moment by God's will, for whatever reason he willed it, that it should not appear to be a fully grown 10-year-old animal, but it should be a fully grown 522 million-year-old animal. Once we're saying that it didn't evolve from the tiniest speck of a seed, so then there's no difference. So even if it looks that old by our dating system, it was created that old from the first moment, so to say. Anyhow, bottom of page 86. It is the soul which fits the human being to be the central agent of God in the creation. And again, that's very empowering, because I don't know if you've ever put it this way or heard it this way. Let's put it this way. Every human being is an ambassador of God in creation, in this world. To return to the Weberian schema, the Noahide worldview beholds a God who is the creator of nature, and a human being with a soul made in the image of God, which resonates with divine values. You understand? Animals don't have that. Only the human being is given commandments and has an image, a copy of God. These values translate into the Noahide laws. The activated spiritual consciousness mandates and properly guides the human being's utilization of nature in accordance with Noahide law. So if you want to be godly, if you want to fulfill the purpose of why you were created and what we're to do with the created world, you need to follow the Noahide laws. This does not mean that nature is bent willy-nilly to the purposes set for it by humanity, that it is mere stuff for human utilization. Don't misunderstand and say, oh, we're the purpose of creation, and therefore everything else, let's just use it as fit. No. There must be regard for the suffering of animals, just as for the destruction and consumption of natural resources. Okay, you can't waste things, and we cannot allow animals to suffer in vain. The Noahide law regulates the treatment of animals, and physical nature was given to Noah at the time when, after the flood, humanity in general was for the first time given permission to kill and consume the flesh of animals, something forbidden at the outset of creation. So yes, there was a time where it was forbidden to eat animals. Okay? But then after the flood, God gave him the seventh law and said, yes, you may consume animals, and here are the restrictions. Prior to that, humanity was given a general dominion of nature, expressed in the biblical injunction to subdue nature, which meant the permission to make them work for humans and to use their hides when they had died naturally, or their wool for clothing. In other words, there's nothing wrong with using an axe to plow your field. You don't have to wait until they invent a tractor or a plow made out of machinery. You're allowed to plow your field. You don't have to have a human being plowing his own field. So you're using the animal, and it's not being cruel to the animal. There's nothing wrong with having horses harnessed and pulling a wagon and using that as your means of transportation. You don't have to wait until they invent the cars and they have horsepower. You're allowed to ride on a horse. You're allowed to have the horses pull the wagon. Nowadays, animals are used not only for work, clothing, and food, but also for forms of medical experimentation, which Noahide law requires be done with the minimization of their suffering. Okay, and that of course gets into a whole worldview, and a lot of products will say on it that we didn't use animals to test them. So we're not saying that it's just free for all, and take those not the mice, the what do they use? Not the rabbits.
The rhesus monkeys.
Okay, right. All those different things that they use. So I'm not saying that you can't use them at all, but you have to understand, if this is going to save human lives, this experiment, so then it's probably permissible. But when do so, it doesn't mean, okay, well, therefore, let's just let them suffer or drive them crazy. No. You have to respect them and minimize as much as possible in their suffering. But the requirement to minimize the suffering of animals and destruction of resources does not supplement the human consumption or utilization of either. Indeed, through incorporation of the animal and natural world in an ethical civilization, the human being is intended to work with God to bring about the manifestation of godliness in the world for the benefit of all creation, including animals and physical nature itself. It is interesting here that hedonistic materialism actually fails to present a rationale for respect for the non-animal environment on its own terms. It cannot do this, unlike the deep ecologists who are frankly idolatrous nature pantheists. Pretty sharp, because it cannot find any sense of self or consciousness or sentience in sub-animal vegetation or inanimate nature. So they only go so far as to respect animals. Consequently, this worldview is left only with animal or human claims for not damaging that aspect of the environment. It would destroy the resident animal populations or pollute the planet, in consequence of which humans would suffer. That's why we don't do it, but it's all about animals and humans. The Noahide laws, on the other hand, do express a sense of respect for the inanimate and vegetative world on their own terms, not just because what's going to happen to animals or people. This is because all of the entities of nature, animal, vegetative, and inanimate, are constantly reanimated into existence by God and with a special divine providence. As we said, everything of creation is being recreated. The providential divine creation and recreation of all things is their value, significance, and spiritual personality. So now when you view it like that, so you tell me now, who's the real one who's concerned with the world we live in and all that? If I view every little seemingly insignificant speck of dust or dirt or grain of sand as being recreated by God this very instant, I have a whole different respect for it. By virtue of this, all things are entitled to be treated thoughtfully and constructively, even though they are at the disposition of human beings. So yes, we are to use them. For this reason, the human being may consume and utilize animals for valid ends, but not with gratuitous pain. And the human being may utilize non-animal nature for valid ends, but not with wanton destruction. So it comes up very, very simple. I mean, this philosophy, this belief that we have is quite clear. The world has a purpose. And the highest form of creation is the human being. The human being has a tremendous responsibility. It's not just that we have rights and therefore we can do as we please to the animals, etc. We have a responsibility, and therefore we should utilize everything in the world for the higher purpose. And in doing so, we need to be conscientious of how we're doing and what we're doing. Now, we're not saying that the Noahides have to slaughter animals in the same manner that Jews do. Some people say, oh, you shouldn't kill any animals. But if you're going to do it already, at least do it the Jewish way. Those laws of shechita, of ritual slaughtering, were given to the Jewish people. But on the other hand, the prohibition of eating a part of an animal from a living creature before it was killed is telling us not to be cruel to animals. And therefore, don't kill the animal in what we would call a sadistic or cruel, painful way. So the Noahide has to be aware that everything here has a purpose, and therefore we can utilize it. And if it means chopping down a tree so that we can have wood, so that we can heat our homes, or that we can cook our food, there's nothing wrong with doing that. You chop down a tree so that you can have a chair and a bench and a table and build a building, etc., etc., etc. That's what they were created for in the first place. Anyhow, I think this is a good point for us to open up now for discussion. So please, anyone who has anything to say, ask or add. This is the time and place. Everything is super clear? We can continue. Please. All right. Remember that this author lives and wrote this in Australia. Just keep that in mind. Okay. The personal moral culture. Bottom of page 88 if you have your own book. The belief in God and spiritual illiteracy. Illiteracy. The fundamental propositions of hedonistic materialism cohere with one another. The first is that there is no God, but only nature. The second is that there is no soul, no mirror of God within the human being, which would give the human being a special role in nature, apportioned by the creator of nature. So they said no such thing. The third is the asserted equality of consideration of humans and animals in their common possession of sentience. The fourth is the principle of the maximization of enjoyment and the minimization of pain equally applied throughout the commonwealth of animals, human animals and animals. The main thing is as much pleasure as you can have, and do not have any pain, and therefore see to it that others have as much pleasure as they can, and do not inflict upon them pain. As stated, these are countered by a parallel but opposite set of fundamental propositions in Noahide belief. There is a God who created and sustains nature and being. There is a soul within the human being which mirrors the divine. The human being alone possesses the spiritual faculty which can access a divine ethical template for the utilization of nature and for the guiding norms for the culture and social relationships built upon its utilization. The principle which guides this utilization and incorporation of nature into an ethical civilization is one which seeks to create a harmony of the material and the spiritual. That is, to manifest the divine within all creation. Creation, nature, which is physical, God, spirituality, have to come together. Because ultimately, God, as the creator, wants something from us. And again, that's very empowering, and it's a great responsibility, and it gives us tremendous, tremendous joy that he appointed us and empowered us as being his partners. He made everything, and we are supposed to bring godliness into it. That's our job. He created, well, I don't want to say it like this. What I don't want to say is he made the mess and he wants us to clean it up. But that's not exactly accurate, because he made the world, which appears, even though not really, but it appears or can appear to be void of God, so much so that you could have intellectual people coming up with all of these crazy philosophies of heresy. So he made such a world, and he wants us to reveal and bring God into the world. And he gave us the tools of how to do that, namely the divine code. The personal moral culture, which fosters this knowledge and awareness, is a spiritual literacy that teaches openness to the experience of the soul. It is unlikely that a human being will develop belief in God if denied the awareness, experience, and use of his or her soul. So you have people, for example, I've heard the argument, why send little children to a religious school where they're going to be indoctrinated with a bunch of beliefs of religion? Why not give them the choice? Why not be fair to the child? Don't tell them about any religion or God or anything of that type, and let them decide or discover on their own. When they become adults, why do you need to, quote unquote, brainwash them, indoctrinate them, at a very young age. It's not fair. Now, what he just said over here is explaining you can't expect a person to develop their belief in God, a God that we cannot see with our physical eyes, if you don't allow them to experience it. For whilst ultimate assumptions underlie all theories, those who expound the materialistic and hedonistic philosophy will not permit or admit the first assumptions, which are really only validated by the soul, the instrument of faith. So yes, faith transcends intellect. That's true. It's higher than intellect and rationale. But in order to tap into it, in order to be able to have it revealed in yourself, you need to not indulge in materialism. The belief that the physical is all that is as much a statement of belief as the religious statement that creation is in a process of continuous recreation by God into existence from nothingness. Contemporary secular high culture delivers and reinforces the first perspective. So that's also a belief system. It's an anti-religious belief system that all we have is the physical, material world, and all that counts is indulgence, pleasure, enjoyment, and stay away from pain and suffering. That's a belief system, a godless world. The way in which spiritual literacy can be taught in schools in contemporary society with an existing plurality of faiths is by studying the common root Noahide or Abrahamic categories with which the major faiths have already been shown to be able to resonate. In other words, we're not saying teach a particular religion, because of course you run into the problem. You have a public school where you have kids with all sorts of backgrounds. Don't teach any specific religion. Make a point not to teach any specific religion. But you must bring in God and go to the root. So B'nai Noahide, is not a religion. And of course, people that don't understand, that don't get it, it's like your friends or relatives, it's difficult when they say, oh, you're Jewish. Say, no, I'm not. And then if you want to be cute, or the way that a Jew would say it is, no, I didn't say you're a Jew, you're Jewish. But all jokes aside, then you try to explain to them, no, I'm not Jewish. So then what are you? I'm Noahide. What's that? And then you have to explain to them that is for all of humanity. So what religion is it? It's not a religion. It's the religion. It's God. It's God's laws. Such an experiment to present basic ethical and theological categories of the Noahide laws and to test them for resonance with a variety of traditional faiths has been carried out with senior Christian, Muslim, and Jewish scholars, all of whom were able to endorse it. Okay, so it's been done. Look at footnote 12. An education in a shared ethic, Melbourne Institute for Judaism and Civilization, 2013, compiled by Rabbi Dr. Shimon Cowen. That's this guy, on behalf of a reference group of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim scholars. So he's saying he did it, or he documented it. There is strong reason to believe that this Noahide template could be extended to and find resonance with Hindu and possibly also Buddhist traditions, inasmuch as these also have a connection with the historical Abraham and the tradition transmitted by him. This common template can be further elaborated to provide a rigorous framework for a school subject, theology. Teachers who themselves are adherents and believers of different cultures could be trained to teach this subject in a way which shows how their own traditions operate within this framework. Societies have traditionally sought a unifying common denominator faith-based ethic and and it tends to be found in the root common denominator. Americans have described this in their context as an ethical monotheism. Australians, a Judeo-Christian ethic, and the term Abrahamic could well be applied to draw in further faith traditions. Part of the task of the school educational subject in traditional faith would be to identify this ethic with its basic shared values and tenets in society's own varied religious cultures. In fact, this common denominator proves to be the Noahide laws. There's nothing more important than that a child should have the opportunity to the spiritual literacy, at least as much the healthy use of its body and mind. And yet, it is the only knowledge which is generally not taught beyond early childhood, Sunday school. It is a subject which can only be taught from the inside, by those who believe and can guide others to the perceptions of faith. Intellectual rigor should then be added on the basis of spiritual perception, equipping the child with faith, which can respond to life's changes. So, education is really, really important. And this is where we get into in America, the moment of silence. And originally, it was a prayer in public schools. I don't remember, it was 1953, whatever. I'm not sure the exact year, the timetable here, but it was introduced that there should be prayer in public school. And of course, there's opposition. And they said, no, you can't. And there was the back and forth and the argument. And then the problem was, if you say a prayer, how could it be non-denominational? Now, let's not forget, for the Americans at least, not everyone here is in America on this class, but for the Americans, it was founded by the founding fathers, and so much so that God is mentioned very clearly, and it's not by reading the words, it does not tell you any particular religion, whether it's the pledging of allegiance or the national anthem or the statement on the currency. All of these things are stating clearly, mentioning God, and they're not getting into any religion. That's a beautiful thing. So then people woke up some 200 plus years later, and they said, oh, we can't have, there's the thing of separation of church and state, and you can't do this, and they want to do away with all of it. And they say, no, you can't allow God into the public schools. It's terrible. Now, the very least, the idea of the moment of silence is when they start off their school day at the beginning. The instructor, the teacher, the principal, whoever, tells the children, you will now have 60 seconds to think about God, pray to God, silently in your heart, in your minds. And then there's silence for 60 seconds. At one time, the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach said, well, what's the kid supposed to think? And a big concern, especially amongst Jews, was, what are they going to tell them? They're going to tell them all sorts of things, Christianity, who knows what in this country, that are against the Torah. So he says, no, if you keep it like that, so then each child will ask their parents at home, what am I supposed to think? What am I supposed to think for the moment of silence? Just as, we're not talking about having the lunch programs where the school gives hot lunch, but in the olden days, just like each family supplies a lunch to their child, they have their lunch box or their lunch bag. You remember the good old days? and you come to school with your lunchbox. So just like physically, they give what they want. Whether you're into health or you're into this, you're into that, every child gets the food that his family decided to give him, the snack, the sandwich, whatever is in there. So too spiritual food. He'll go home, he'll ask his parents, what am I supposed to think about? And each family, with their background, with their religion, will tell them what to think about. And then they're thinking about God. So there's no danger here of coercion of any particular religion over the other. And even for those that are told to think about incorrect things because their religions are not 100% right, that's all better than a godless world. To take him out of the picture and say there is no God. And if we would do this, this is the minimum, a moment of silence. If they would do that, says the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach, that the crime rate would go down so much you cannot imagine, because the children will be indoctrinated and be taught, and they'll realize that they spend every day 60 seconds thinking about God. So then, to use the terms of Pirkei Avos, the ethics of the fathers in the Talmud, that there's an eye that sees and an ear that hears. So therefore, this kid is not going to grow up thinking that he can do whatever he wants and whatever he pleases and whatever is good for him and whatever he enjoys. But he will realize that there's an eye that sees and an ear that hears, even if there are no cameras in that particular spot, or he managed to, circumvent the cameras. I think we're going to stop here at this point. If anybody has anything that they would like to contribute, ask, clarify, now is the time to do so. We're on top, towards the top of page 91.
I appreciate the clarification of some principles that I've learned over the years. Even when I'm thinking about the science and things that I've studied in the books and how they talk about matter being not something that's just a solid piece, it's just sitting there. It's actually got energy and it's formed and it's bonded together by atoms, little small things that we can't see. And I think about that Hashem. He has entities actually establishing these things at all times. Like every blade of grass has its own angel. And I recognize this now. And it took so long, but this kind of verifies the stuff that I've been learning over the years.
Yeah.
James has his hand up.
James?
Yes, thank you. That was well said. I just wanted to let you know, I serve on a, I don't say this to boast, but I serve on a state commission where we look at cases, the individuals that are in a guardianship role, either the state or somebody, and they're incapacitated. But I've been on there with a number of individuals for over a decade now, and they know that I'm Noahide. And when I first mentioned to them, there are two of them that are Muslim, great men, outstanding men. When I said, it's Abrahamic, and he's our father. So what you're getting at earlier, it's the universalness is so useful in making conversations and then putting people at ease. I marvel at it. That's so I'm hopeful. I'm grateful, and I just wanted to mention that it's a good thing. I've known these men for over a decade, and they're great men, and they understand the Abrahamic tradition, even though it might be from a Muslim perspective, but they still understand
You
it.
keep up the good work. You have a mission. Keep up your good work.
Well, thank you.
And
You know,
all of you.
It's interesting. I serve as the chair, so they put the letters in my name, but I'm the one that does the least work. They go to the site visits if somebody's like not guilty by reason of insanity, but they feel their rights are being violated. They can petition us, and we will look into it, and or just somebody that's on a temporary hold, and because of a mental health issue or a guardianship issue, and yeah, it's I take it seriously, and I'm grateful, and these lessons just strengthen me. So thank you, Rabbi, and thank you, class.
Yes. Everyone has their influence. You have the influence, whether it's direct, but surely indirectly on other people. It's not always by way of teaching, but sometimes, oftentimes, the best way to teach is by being a living example. All right. Everybody be well until next time. And
Oh, wait, James Gosnell?
James Gosnell.
Hello, Rabbi. Sorry. I'm facilitating a Shar HaYehud V'Emunah class, and we've been going over what this topic was on how Hashem is creating everything. And man, I'll tell you what, we are seeing how this is so important when it comes to Lo Avodah Zarah, not doing idolatry. This really is, the Tanya really is something that should almost be mandatory, in my opinion, if you're really wanting to get into it. I've had multiple non-Jews tell me that they are loving the Tanya, and we're just getting started in it. What are your thoughts when it comes to Avodah Zarah and the importance of this? How do you have any kind of insight when it comes to the importance of the teaching of the Alter Rebbe on this?
I think as time is progressing and the further we're getting into it, the more necessary it becomes. In other words, this whole idea, as I mentioned in the class, the way he just presented it as if, yeah, of course, every Noahide has to believe that. This is novel to Judaism since the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. It's only a couple hundred years, not more. And now we're saying that this is beneficial for everybody. Now, initially, the fact that Shar HaYichud V'Emunah, the gate of unification and belief, was translated into English, that makes it accessible, more accessible, and that's good. But as time progresses, I think it becomes, like you're saying, mandatory. It's more necessary. It's not just, for those brighter students or for the people that are deeper thinkers, here, let them have some of this. I think now it's really, as you're saying, that makes it all that much easier to reject Avodah Zarah. If you know the absolute truth, not just the truth, but the absolute truth, well, then that's easier. So yes, it does take a lot of brain power. I'm not going to say that the 12 chapters of Shar Yichud V'Emunah are easy, simple read, where you're just relaxing and it's you're reading it in bed as you're falling asleep or whatever. No, it does take a lot of concentration, and you got to really focus and review, etc. But when you put in that work, that mental, intellectual work, what you're going to gain is it's going to become easy to reject any way, shape, or form of any type of Avodah Zarah, of idolatry.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for what you're doing, Rabbi Turin, and thank you everybody for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Aaron Benoit.
Aaron Benoit.
Yeah, I got one more question, Rabbi. A long time ago, I was asking my rabbi, who I've been acquainted with for a long time, did God create the earth, and how could it be millions of years old with dinosaurs and all the rest of that stuff right there? And he said something to me that has always struck me, and I'm kind of wondering if this goes along with what we read tonight. He said, why couldn't God create everything the same way at one time? And I think, is that what this was saying tonight?
Yeah, that's what I mentioned. Yeah.
Ah, okay. I'm just making sure that these two are corresponding with each other.
Yeah.
The implication of that would be a multi-class topic.
Yes. Yeah, it is a topic unto itself. That's correct. A lot of things that we touch upon are really a whole series of volumes of information. Fine. All the best.
Be a great
Thank you.
class.
Stay well.
Thank you. Be
Yeah,
well.
now.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Yeah, have a good evening.